Hey guys, it's Jess. I know that Hammett has been doing a lot of solo shows. I think he's told you guys that he just had a human baby who I met the other day and is adorable. I got married. We've just been kind of busy doing life things. That said, I have an interview with, actually, who's a friend of mine, somebody who I've wanted to talk to for a while about this. I mean, we work together, I talk to him a lot. But I wanted to talk to him about this specifically. So this is Eric Wendt. Say
Hello.
hi. Hi. Eric and I have known each other for a couple of years. We work together. Full disclosure, we're friends, right? Right?
In a court of law, that would hold up. Yeah.
But I found out a little while ago that Eric was actually raised in a cult. And, yeah, and I think, him and I doing this show, we have the opportunity to talk to really incredible people, to authors and people who are leaders among the community, but I think it's just important, if not more important.
To talk to losers sometimes.
I felt it coming. But just to people who are living their lives and have these, like, weird, crazy stories of being brought up in a religion that has kind of shaped their life and everything else. So, with that said, Eric, what, you grew up in the, what's it called?
Worldwide Church of God.
Right.
Very specific, not generic.
Generic, yeah. God in general.
Church,
the right God,
world.
though.
Yeah, exactly.
So I did a little research at work when I was supposed to be working. Sorry if anybody who we work with is listening to this. It was founded in 1934 by Pastor General Herbert W. Armstrong.
HW, that's correct.
How does one get the title Pastor General?
You know, that's a good question.
Thank you. I'm a very good interviewer.
I assume because he was high up in God's army is
Sure.
probably where that came from.
Sure. That's how everybody gets
We did sing Onward Christian Soldier a lot. So I think the whole military thing was...
Wait, do you know, I mean, I only have very limited notes. Do you know, did he have a military background, do you know?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
As far as, in my mind, I like to imagine him as like a grifter, like Steve Martin in that movie, who just like
The
rolls.
Jerk? No. The Jerk?
The one where he's like a pastor, who like an...
Oh, yeah,
you
yeah.
know, like he does like fake miracles. Like,
Yeah.
I just imagine him just like
People are
rambling
screaming
from
into their
town to
headsets
town.
right now, like,
And then he found California, and everyone really loved it.
just dropped in.
Yeah.
So it was founded in 1934. He founded the Radio Church of God, which actually we talked about a little bit at dinner, that, like, he was...
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's part of the reason his whole deal became so successful, was he was probably... I'm not an expert on, you know, radio technology and its history by any means.
You're not.
But
That's weird, because we took 28 hours to set up this radio thing. But go ahead.
I have a feeling him, you know, he was probably at the forefront of people using radio technology to evangelize. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with his popularity.
Sure. So it was in the sect of Christianity, for sure. Like, it was based in the Bible, certainly. So, according to my expertly written notes, it was close to the Bible, but he didn't follow a lot of Christian teaching. So, like, the Sabbath remained on a Saturday as opposed to many Christians went to Sunday.
Yeah.
He didn't acknowledge the Holy Ghost as a distinct person. Because that wasn't, like, specified in the Bible.
Yeah, he didn't hold to that whole Trinity business. Yeah, there was I kind of did some research before this too, just because, like, obviously I have a lot of memories of growing up in it, but those are all, like, very personal, kind of narrow memories of a child. And so I started sort of, like, researching, like, okay, who the hell was this guy, actually? And from what I read, yeah, a lot of it was taken just from Seventh-day Adventists, mixed with a little bit of Mormonism, mixed with a little bit of Judaism, just because Old Testament Christianity is Judaism, essentially.
Sure.
Kind of a grab bag of really strict religions, and then somehow mixed with his own personal weirdness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, whenever you talk about cults, which there's definitely a conversation we had regarding, is this a cult versus a legitimate branch of Christianity, which, like, I don't think you and I are going to solve that particular equation.
The line, exactly.
Right, but there's definitely an element of, like, a cult of personality.
Oh, for sure. I mean, he, no matter what he, I mean, whether what he believed was mainstream Christianity or not, he definitely made himself the figurehead of the church, and he definitely made it clear that he was sort of a messenger directly from God.
Yeah.
And that,
Well, he certainly called to end the times.
which you can only do if God is talking directly to you.
Well, he did it in the 40s, which, frankly, is like if you're like hedging your bets about when the world is gonna end, like mid World War II, you're like, this is it. I'm throwing my chips in.
He was the first with radio. He was the first with the end of the world. He was the Steve Jobs of fucking nutballs.
But he did, I mean, obviously, 1940s didn't work out super well for him, but he did it. It seems like, from what I read, it seemed like once a decade. He was like, no. Sorry, guys, this is it.
Yeah, that's, yeah, I'm not sure, like...
Was that something you remember of them?
I'm not sure if that's something that he kind of toned down, maybe in the 80s and, like,
well, he died
90s.
In the 80s, so that
So then he definitely toned down a lot. Yeah, that wasn't something that my parents ever talked to me about. It wasn't something that, like, I remember growing up, like, the whole idea of the end times. I definitely remember a lot of talk about people burning in hell forever, but not necessarily when the world is going to end.
Yeah. Well, Armstrong died in 1986, which is right around when you were born, yeah?
Yeah, I was born in 86, so yeah.
So in fact, what you're saying is you're Armstrong
what
incarnate?
I'm saying is I am Armstrong.
I'm so glad you came on my podcast to declare that.
Thank you for having me.
So a lot of things happened in the 80s that sort of shifted it like super into that cult versus kind of a weird sect of Christianity.
Yeah.
So what
Gotta get those notes.
Yeah, no, I got my notes. So the church admin, they moved toward or away mainstream Christianity?
Well, I think after...
In your experience.
After Armstrong died, there was sort of a move toward, like, okay, now that this crazy man is gone, let's, like, slowly but surely creep our way into being more mainstream, in quotes, I guess. Like, sort of, you know, we're not going to talk so much about the end of the world anymore, and maybe now... You know what I mean? So, like... And that kind of caused a rift with a lot of people, I remember. Just the whole idea of it becoming more like your standard evangelical church. But, I mean, even my time there, though, it was pretty nutballs.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple notes regarding, like, what specifically made it culty versus, like, your general...
Your standard evergreen church.
Yeah, exactly. So, you grew up in California. And it was, my understanding is that it's all based in, like, Pasadena, California.
Yeah, the headquarters were in Pasadena. That's where they built their own college, once again, in quotes.
Well, there's a ton of tithing. So what I read was 10% of the church, then you have to save 10%. This is, like, somebody's income, 10% of the church, 10% savings to travel to the Feast of Tabernacles, which I think you have.
Yeah, well, because we didn't celebrate holidays. Well, we celebrated very specific biblical holidays.
Sure.
And Feast of the Tabernacles was one of, like, if not the biggest one. So that was like, fuck, you know, screw Christmas. We don't do that. But we're doing Passover.
Tabernacles.
We're doing the Feast of the Tabernacles.
All day.
Yeah.
And then, and I don't know if this is your experience. I don't think as a 10-year-old you had a lot of experience in tithing, I assume. And then every third year members had to give to care for the, quote, widows and orphans of the church.
Yeah.
There are also 7 holy days throughout the year where baskets were passed. And then, in addition, monthly mailers were sent to members and non-members claiming the church was on the verge of financial collapse. Meanwhile, the church's headquarters were in Pasadena on land worth approximately $300 million. Armstrong had a mansion on Orange Grove Boulevard, which is where the Rose Parade is. There was also an ambassador auditorium made out of emerald and pink onyx. Just all kind, like they clearly had like money.
And they would have like huge musical artists come play at the auditorium.
Do you remember that?
No, I was too young to like remember any of like going to shows, but yeah, definitely, it wasn't a secret that they were
had money
incredibly wealthy as far as money goes.
So let's dig into talking about kind of your experience.
Yeah.
So you grew up in California.
Yes.
Go on.
California. You know, it's funny. It's kind of like, I guess it's like this with everything, whether it's growing up in a weird church or just having weird parents, or whatever. But your experience as a child is just, you assume, is the experience of everyone.
Yeah, I've heard that from
So I kind of just always assumed everyone's parents went to church on Saturday, not Sunday, and everyone's parents give 10% of their income to their church.
But were you aware of that? Like, were you aware of your parents?
I do, yeah.
Give up money?
I remember, like, you kind of sponge things up as a kid, I guess. And, like, I definitely remember hearing about the 10% and the tithe thing and just assuming that was normal. I didn't really start to realize that I was being raised drastically differently from people until probably elementary school. We would get pepperoni pizza every Friday in elementary school, but we weren't allowed to eat pork or...
Really?
Well, because in the Old Testament of the Bible it says you cannot eat any animal that is unclean or like that walks on the bottom of the ocean.
Lobster and
no lobster, no
pork.
shrimp, no crab, no pork.
That's too bad. Those are some really...
Yeah, right. I mean, trust me now. Like, I go to Red Lobster and bring my own bacon now.
You're making it for last time.
But, yeah, I didn't realize I was, weird until I would pick off all the pepperoni from my pizza every Friday at school so I could eat just, like, the remainder, like, bread and sauce.
Was it a cheese,
and then,
I hope?
All my friends loved it because they were just like, yeah, I will have your pepperoni, please.
But did you understand why you were doing it, or you just... Or, like, did you see your friends as, like, doing something wrong?
Not at all. That's the weird thing, right? Is, like, in my mind, it wasn't like, oh, my friends are going to hell. It was more just like, I've been told not to do these things, so I will not do them.
Yeah. But you mentioned, like, you had to go, like, leave the classroom for Christmas?
Yeah, we didn't celebrate what would you consider traditional holidays, so...
What would you consider Christmas?
Well, isn't that so weird? Like, a Christian church that does not celebrate Christmas.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, to be fair, Christmas wasn't celebrated on December 25th for a long time, and that was largely stolen from pagan holidays. So if we're talking about people who are sticking the closest to the Bible they can...
I guess in a weird way Armstrong was like, no, this is pagan bullshit, like, we won't do this, but, that's one of my earlier memories, too, is, like, in elementary school, around this time, teachers teach you some stuff, but a lot of it is them just sort of babysitting you and, like, doing arts and crafts.
Until your parents pick you up.
Exactly. And, around this time every year, we would, take popsicle sticks and paper plates and puffballs and make images of Santa. And I was always that kid who would, like, raise his hand and be like, I can't participate in this.
And did you...
We don't believe in this man, and this is a pagan holiday, and Santa is not real.
And then you slapped your teacher.
Yeah, and I was just the most popular kid in elementary school.
Did you feel like you were in the right when you did that, or did you feel uncomfortable?
You know what? I weirdly, vaguely remember feeling like that kind of righteousness that you can only get from being like having your head so far up your own ass. Like, I was just like, part of me was kind of like, I'm right, we do things this way, you guys go ahead and do your weird pagan holiday. I'm gonna go sit and read Highlights magazine.
But was the community around you largely agreeing with you, or were you the only person in your school who did this kind of thing?
I mean, all my family on both sides was a part of the church, but,
Do you know how they got into the church?
It's a good question.
Thank you. I'm a professional interviewer.
I will not say that again. No, I don't. My dad's family was in Pasadena, so that's where my family is from. And
that's not where you grew up, right?
No,
or was it?
Well, I was raised in Modesto, California.
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 Sorry. God damn it.
But, well, that's the weird thing, though, is my mom was already married before she met my dad. And her family, I believe, was already a part of the church at that time. My dad came up to Riverbank, California, which is near Modesto. And from what I remember, the story is he saw my mom at, like, a lake party, slapped her ass. And she was like, I'm married. And he was like, that's too bad. And then,
I can't imagine where you got this from.
The rest is history. She divorced her first husband and married my father. And then...
Do you have any half-siblings?
No. It just turned out that the woman my father married's family was also part of the church.
Weird.
So I grew up with both sides of, like... And I have very large extended families on both sides. And both sides were a part of the Worldwide Church of God.
So it was all very normalized for you.
Exactly. Like, I grew up with a ton of cousins, a ton of aunts and uncles, and everyone was a part of the church.
So in hindsight, what makes you look back and say, like, oh, this is super occult, as opposed to, like, how many friends do we have who were raised Catholic or Baptist or whatever, and we're like, no, we were just
anyone could make the case, I guess, that, like, every church is a cult or every religion is a cult or whatever, but not every religion asks you to give 10% of your income to the church.
The thing is, that's not super uncommon, but, like, for sure that this church that you're raised in, like, if you, we were talking about this at dinner, like, if you Google the church, like, the first thing is, like, so-and-so cult.
Yeah, like, the first, like, 10, responses on Google, like, 4 out of 10 have the word cult in them in the headline. Right. I think probably what makes it, quote-unquote, a cult is Armstrong. The guy who started it and the leader of it all. Type thing. He was the figurehead. He had a lot of crazy-ass things to say, and as time went on, he sort of only got crazier and crazier, and then, a lot of his own skeletons started coming out of his closet as far as illegal stuff, crimes, him hoarding money, him just... Also, the whole idea of using religion to sort of control people beyond just how it's always used to control people, but the whole idea of disfellowship was a big thing, so sort of wielding that in the same way that, maybe Catholics 200 years ago wielded excommunication.
Or Mormons have a similar idea of, like, if you get booted out.
If you cross me, I will not only kick you out of the church, I will make sure that everyone you know and love is no longer a part of your life.
Yeah, that's actually something I read in a couple different places, but that Armstrong was definitely accused of sexual improprieties. Apparently his daughter accused him of molesting him for, like, 10 years.
Yeah.
Which is upsetting. But also members who question the church, who question church doctrines, have been kicked out, and ministers can also kick out members if they just suspect disloyalty.
Yeah.
Did you ever say that?
I remember as a kid, like, it's weird. You kind of notice when your parents talk differently about certain things. Their tones of voices maybe get quieter, a little more gossipy. And so I do remember talk about people being disfellowshipped and just sort of things happening. Like, I remember Garner Ted, the son...
because once what's his face? What's his name?
Armstrong. Herbert Armstrong. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea, he had a son, Garner Ted, who was kind of just going to be his likely successor as the figurehead of this church. And Garner Ted ended up being disfellowshipped. Do
you know what he did?
Well, the rumors were that he was sleeping with a lot of co-eds at the college that the church had created in Pasadena, which, obviously goes against church doctrine. Is
it a very, like, sex-strict doctrine?
Yeah, I mean, in the sense of any religion,
having sex outside wedlock, is that...
Yeah, that's a bit... Especially if you're supposed to be the new, like, second coming of Christ. Yeah,
but who among us isn't?
But then there was a lot of talk about Garner Ted sort of, like, wanting to change things, and his father feeling threatened, and then, like, outside people getting involved, and it turning into a whole ordeal. I guess, besides the whole cult of personality thing, things that stick out to me now that at the time seemed totally normal, but to now I just realize are crazy, are things like not going to doctors.
Yeah, you mentioned this to me like a year ago.
Like, we did... See, that's kind of there's a whole other facet to it, which is that my mom was so amazing, and even though she was a part of this whole thing, she kind of rebelled against it in small ways. It's like, we did go to doctors, but I have Tourette's syndrome. I suffer from it. It's a very mild form of it, but it was a lot worse when I was a small child. And
it manifests itself in, like, tics.
Yeah, it would manifest itself in, physical movements, especially of, like, my neck and head, which, like, as a mom, watching your son, like, spaz his head to the side over and over again has got to be pretty freaky. But instead of taking me to a doctor at first, they took me to the church. And a group of men stood around me in a circle and, like, held hands and sort of, like, prayed in a weird way around me, and that was supposed to expel, whatever demonic influence was causing this.
And how'd that go?
Did not work.
It didn't work. You don't say.
Yeah. I dealt with the whole Tourette thing on my own until probably my teens. Finally, a doctor was like, "Oh, well, if you take this pill, it might help with that too." But
yeah, and that seems like a really a huge story of religion mistrusting science in general and doctors specifically, which is kind of upsetting, especially if you think of a kid going through something that was, I assume, I'm not going to speak for you, but I assume, like, uncomfortable or upsetting or in some way.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, like, just assuming everything is normal as a child, but, like,
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, like, if I saw my son, like, doing that, like, my first thought would be, like, holy shit, we gotta get this kid to a hospital.
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with him? And I'm sure my mom felt that way. And, like, but that's the thing, is, like, my mom is a badass. My mom, you know, she was a part of this. She, like, sang in the choir and was there every Saturday with my dad. Mm-hmm. But she would cut corners for me and my brothers.
What do you mean?
Well, like, one of the high holidays or holy days was the day of unleavened bread, which was a fasting day. Mm-hmm. So, as a child, we were not allowed to eat for 24 hours.
That feels like not a great thing for a kid.
Yeah, no, kids do not give a shit about fasting. They're just like, I am so hungry.
Cheese boxes all day.
Yeah, I remember my mom specifically taking us to McDonald's on the day of unleavened bread and, like, buying us cheeseburgers and, like, turning around and being like, do not tell your dad. And it was sort of just like, you know, we knew, like, instinctively, like, okay, we will not spill the beans on this. Like, mom is, like, breaking church doctrine to get her children fed because it probably hurt her to watch us, like, be so hungry.
Yeah, but I mean, how does that? I mean, I don't want to dig too much into, like, your relationship with your mom, but, like, how does that make you feel to think that your mom, clearly, if she was willing to feed her kids mm-hmm. on a holy day, mm-hmm.
How much did she really believe?
Exactly.
I don't know. I mean, I think my mom believes in God, whether or not it's a belief that stems from personal conviction or just being raised all her life so intensely into it. You know, the thing with any kind of strict religion, especially a cult where the strictness is just, like, the whole point.
Yeah.
If you have any kind of mind that asks, that kind of forces you to ask questions, you find these weird loopholes and things. And I remember, like, baptism was, like, a really big deal growing up.
Did you get baptized as a baby or, like,
I wasn't. Yeah,
you never
in
were?
our church, you got baptized when you were older.
Oh,
well, that's the thing.
Sorry.
I remember asking my mom because I someone explained to me what baptism was. Washing the sins away, you're now clean and are going to heaven. And I remember asking my mom, like, I was like a small child, and being like, Mom, so if, like, a child murderer gets baptized in prison and dies, he'll go to heaven. And my mom was like, yeah.
Did you really ask that kind of shit?
And then I was like, but what if someone who's a good person but has not been baptized gets hit by a car and dies? And I don't remember what her answer was. That might have been my dad actually asked. And I feel like my dad, like, that was like, I caught him, like, in, like, that, you know what I mean? Like, and it's weird, like, catch-22, and he was just like, go play with your friends, you know, like.
Well, I think, I don't know, not that I have kids or you have kids, mm-hmm. But you have
I have several.
You several, not that you, not whom you, no. We can need you not in.
Yes.
There's multiple kids. Sorry. Anyway, but no, when I think about the conversations I had with my folks, that I've had this conversation with my parents a zillion times, and I don't know, I think both kind of say agnosticism is their jam, but I don't know what that means to them. But I remember having conversations with both of them. My dad, like, one of my first, honestly, probably one of the reasons I'm an adamant atheist is when I was young, I remember seeing this woman and I had a Band-Aid on my arm because I'd just gotten, like, a vaccine of some kind. And this woman asked me, I was at the pool, oh, what happened to your arm? And I was like, oh, I got a shot because you're 6 and you talk to anybody. And she was like, oh, we don't believe in shots. And I was like,
God.
Oh, this sounds awesome. I don't have to get shot. Yeah. So I went into my dad. I was like, that woman said, I don't have to get shot. Or she said, we don't have to get shot. So I went out. And I will remember this honestly for the rest of my life, that my dad was like, oh, it's because they think God is going to heal them. And I had never heard my dad talk about God. I had never heard my dad talk. He was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
But the vitriol that he had in his voice about, like, fuck that bitch.
Yeah.
Like, who does she think she... And now that I'm 30 years old, I'm like, yeah, no, super fuck that bitch.
Yeah.
Like, she's the reason smallpox are back.
Well, and, like, when you're a kid and you're raised in an environment where half of everything you hear is about how if you don't do something the correct way, you're going to burn in the fires of hell for eternity, that's something you think about a lot. Like, I remember thinking about hell all the time.
Well, I mean, you're not the first person I've heard that from. Like, I was lucky enough that my parents were Catholic but didn't raise me as such, but, like, people who I knew who grew up Catholic or Christian of some sect, like, it was, like, that's shitty. That's fucking shitty to, like, tell your kids, like, if you're bad, it's not like if you're bad, Santa's not going to give you gifts, or if you're bad, XYZ is going to... If you're bad, you're going to burn in hell forever. Like, how can you tell that to a child?
And also, it's not even if you're bad. You can be the greatest person ever, but unless you follow these incredibly strict guidelines that, you know, the guy in charge has put down, it doesn't matter how good you are. Like, you're going to die and go to hell.
Would you call what you went through abuse?
No. Only because, in a weird way, it's almost like my family, we were a part of it, we did it, but it's like the little things, like my mom buying those cheeseburgers. Like, I almost feel like they always kind of went up to the edge of being, like, holy roller, true believers, but always kind of stepped back a little bit. And I guarantee you, if there would ever come a moment where, like, the church asked them to do something to us, or to abuse us or abandon us in any kind of way, my mom would have turned into Mama Bear and said, you know, fuck this church, fuck your God, fuck you, these are my kids. But at the same time, yeah, you know, there's a part of me that's sort of like, it's definitely influenced in a million ways that I can think of, and probably a million ways I can't think of who I am as a person and the way I look at the world, and just distrust of most institutions and most people. And
sorry, I'm right here.
You know, I mean, yeah, probably a big part of the reason I am an atheist is because I was born into this church.
Oh, that's definitely something I should have asked like 20 minutes ago. So you're an atheist now?
Yeah, definitely.
Which is literally one of the first conversations we had when we started working together.
Yeah.
But
it's funny you brought up the agnostic thing. Like, I always, like, when people say they're agnostic, I'm always like, just, come on, just choose a side.
You know what,
don't hedge your bet.
No, in a lot of ways I feel the same way, but I also don't... When I tell people I'm an atheist, I see their, like, weird face.
Of, like, oh, you think you know it all.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, no, like,
which I do.
Yeah. Well, it's just, like, the whole thing with agnostics is, like, well, you know, I may not necessarily believe this, but there could be something. No. And it's like, well, yeah, there could be a Santa Claus, I guess.
But there's also a lot of people who, and honestly, had I not kind of wandered into what I do now, and frankly, and I've mentioned this a few times in the podcast, like, if Mikey, my husband, had never met me, I guarantee he'd call himself an agnostic, because, like, he just doesn't have, at his point, he just didn't have a dog in the fight. He's like, I'm not atheist. Clearly people don't like atheists, so, like, I'm not gonna...
Yeah, the funny thing about agnostics is it's like, you're sort of like, well, I don't know what to believe, but it's like, if you're wrong about, like, if there is a God, you're still going to hell, whether or not you're agnostic.
Like, I've heard so many people justify why they say the word agnostic, and I don't, like, it's fine. I've gotten to the point where I don't feel like policing anybody's self, what they call themselves. It just, I have better things to do. I know it seems unlikely, because you know me pretty well.
I literally have nothing better to do. All I do is police the non-believing community.
Oh, and if anybody's been yelled at on Reddit, it's just Eric. It's just Eric being mad.
I am all men on Reddit. I am all fedoras. We are one.
But, anyway, so let's talk about your kind of journey from this weird dumb church to atheism.
Sure. So so
yeah,
it's a weird church.
Some bad roads in between.
Yeah, I mean, okay, all right.
Do you want another beer?
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm gonna get another beer. He's gonna talk.
So my family ended up leaving the church when I was, I want to say, 13, and then we sort of went to a more mainstream evangelical church. And that continued for a while, but it didn't last terribly long. And eventually I got to an age where it was okay for me not to go anymore. Like, I remember, like, it was never even an option before.
I'm back. What age was that?
Maybe, like, 16, 17. Like, I I remember.
So when you're 12 or 13, are there like, do you say you don't want to go, or do you just go because?
Well, I mean, no one wants to go to church when they're 13 years old. It's just like
nobody wants to do anything.
I have to get up on Saturday. Oh, we still went on Saturday.
It was Saturday.
Yeah. But
is this after you left the church? You still?
Yeah, like I forget. I don't know if it was an offshoot of Worldwide Church of God or if it was a whole brand new thing, but. Did that for a long time, and then I think eventually, like probably around the time I started smoking cigarettes, like.
So 12.
13 actually.
No.
No, but yeah, eventually it just became a thing like where my parents stopped. Well, my parents' marriage started falling apart. They stopped going to church. I stopped going to church. It almost sounds like a parable. Like they stopped going to church, and then the whole marriage fell apart.
Wait, but what was the honestly? And if you don't want to talk about it, you don't have to. But like, which came before the other?
I don't know. My dad's always been an alcoholic, so their marriage was always a tenuous deal. That was mostly just my mom being like, I guess it's better that they have a father, even if he's a drunk father. And but you know what? Weirdly enough, I do not think my mom would have had the chutzpah to leave
Michelle Bachman
to leave my dad if they had still been as intense into the church as they
Really?
were. Well, yeah, because I mean that's a huge no-no in the church. You do not get a divorce. You do not leave your husband.
But didn't your mom leave a husband already?
Oh man, good point.
Thank you.
I guess we're all going to hell. But it's cool she left an asshole. I don't think he was part of the church, whereas my dad was part of the church.
Different asshole.
You know? Oh God, yes, an asshole named Bruce. Don't listen to this, Dad. Yeah, so that happened. I discovered marijuana, which I fell in love with immediately. And then about a year or two after that, I discovered cocaine and heroin and crystal meth. And
but who doesn't?
The trifecta. Marijuana.
And this was you were how old?
17.
Okay.
So yeah, I spent a solid 2, 3, 4 years just, I guess experimenting isn't the right word when you're like running away from home and live in a car and do crystal meth.
Oof.
I spent about 2 to 4 years being a drug addict.
2 to 4 years is a pretty broad
yeah, right.
statement.
I mean, I managed to I graduated community college in 4 years, so I was doing okay as far as drug addicts go. I didn't OD like a lot of my friends, but.
But yeah. Do you think that the church got you? Is there a cause and effect regarding the church and your drug addiction?
What's that cliche that the preacher's daughter is always the craziest one? Maybe there is an element of the pendulum always swings as far away,
sure,
based on where it was. And if I was in this where you're not even allowed to eat fucking bacon. Mm-hmm. Maybe that did have something to do with the fact that I was just so open to the idea of just shooting up heroin. Let's get it as far away from the no bacon thing as possible. I
mean, there's definitely an idea of you were never allowed to make your own decisions. Mm. And so all the decision. I mean, this is me talking out of my own ass.
This is you with just years and years of psychology.
No, only
research.
2 glasses of wine. No, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You were... and that's what people... I witnessed, certainly. I went to college in Indiana. Mm-hmm. That people who came from, tiny towns who weren't allowed to do XYZ, and all of a sudden they were the ones who were, getting fucked up and slipping around.
I can do this now, so I'm going to do it nonstop all the time.
Granted, I don't know how many people I knew who went, as far as heroin.
Yeah, probably more than you think.
That's fair enough.
No, yeah, I'm sure... I'm not... I think, first of all, my family, just in general, genetically, is predisposed to...
addiction?
Addiction. My dad's an alcoholic. My grandfather was an alcoholic. My mom was dad.
This wasn't the best time to open a beer.
A lot of my aunts and uncles have struggled with various forms of addiction. Some of them still do.
So it might have been less to do with your church and more to do with just.
I'm sure the whole idea of me being kind of this repressed, weirdly raised child didn't help things. But I also think a lot of it had to do with predisposition and also my parents' marriage falling apart. And just my dad being...
How old are you when that happened?
I mean, it was falling apart since the day I was born, but probably between the ages of 13 and 17 is when it got...
Bad.
It's when you realize that your dad's an alcoholic and that he's, like, dangerous and, you know, the yelling and the screaming and the crying and all that. You know, you tend to sort of retreat into yourself, and drugs are an amazing way to feel great when you feel horrible. I know I shouldn't say that, but there's a reason people do drugs, and it's because they feel fucking fantastic.
I mean, I don't think anybody, or I hope anybody who listens to this podcast isn't naive enough to think about, like, drugs make you feel like garbage. That's why bad people do them.
That's why you stab yourself with a needle, because it feels horrible.
So you got into drugs.
Got into drugs, got out of drugs, slowly-ish, but eventually completely, and fell in love with journalism, and went to college to study that, and wrote for the school newspaper, got a job at a magazine when I graduated, eventually moved to Chicago, and the first job I ever got was at content marketing firm, which is where I met you.
Uh-huh. The most important part of your life.
Yeah, like, the cornerstone, the foundation. And then I've been, you know... So I guess, yeah, I fell in love with writing and the written word, and I've been able to make that...
I mean, I think inarguably you've climbed out of the hole that you were in.
The K-hole. It's a drug reference.
I won't say that.
Okay.
That's fine.
Yeah, for sure. You know what's funny, though? Even when I was, like, a drug addict, I still wouldn't have said I was an atheist. Like, because the programming is so strong.
So what happened? What got you to where you are? Was it me? Oh my god, tell me it was me.
Oh no.
Oh
for
please,
sure not.
come on!
I probably admitted to myself that I was an atheist. It's almost like you're coming out of the closet.
Yes, I think a lot of people would agree with you there.
I admitted to myself that I was an atheist probably when I was in college, because those goddamn liberal professors. No, but like, I remember, like, even when I doubted that God existed, even as a child, because it just made no fucking sense. I was still so deathly afraid that I was wrong and that I was going to go to hell. And even when I was, like, you know, snorting cocaine and then smoking heroin and then snorting crystal meth and then just repeating and the whole cycle, like, I obviously had no value of my life and was totally, like, just like, whatever, man, if I die, I die. But
I hate that.
Part of me was still like, I can't say that I don't believe in God, because if I do die tonight, I do not want to go to hell. And I was so scared that I was like somehow just being a total asshole and not like seeing the truth, and the truth was the gospel. And like, I was so deathly afraid. And I think once I got clean and just kind of, you know, college is a time where you sort of explore more philosophical ideas and kind of ask yourself these bigger questions. And I just couldn't reconcile the fact that, like, I give a shit about people, and I saw
people who weren't in your...
People that weren't in my religion.
Like, and you don't want me to go to hell, right?
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
let's bring this back to me real quick.
Yeah, like, I think if you are smart enough and you actually care about the world and the people in it, it's really hard to reconcile that with such a narrow view of who is and isn't allowed to have a happy life and have, like, everlasting happiness in eternity.
But can you also reconcile that with, like, what you thought when you were a teenager? Or does that feel like a different person?
You mean, like, reconcile how I feel now with how I felt then?
Mm-hmm. So, like, again, let's bring it back to me real quick.
Of course.
Yeah, it was too long not talking about it. No, but, like, you know, if you met somebody like me, because I definitely had a very influential meeting with a friend of mine who was Catholic, and I gave her the, like, well, I believe, you know, I don't go to church, but I believe that if I'm a good person, I would go to heaven, and if whatever. And she was like, no, you don't go to church, you go to hell.
Works, yeah.
Right, exactly. And I that's a very formative moment in my life. Yeah. If you were that girl talking to, like, a young, do you think you would have felt the same way?
Definitely not. Part of me still believed in God, and you know what? Whenever I'm on an airplane now, part of me still does believe in God, just because I'm like, please, do not let me crash, because I'm so terribly afraid of flying. But
of frying?
I meant to say flying, but technically frying, because if I die, I would go to hell. So I was correct.
God damn it.
But no, even as a teenager, like, I knew that was bullshit. Like, I had one of my best friends was Jewish, and I remember asking him about Judaism, because, like, I had no idea. Which is weird, because weirdly enough, I was raised in that fucking weird religion, which almost was sort of Judaism in a lot of ways. And, I remember him being like, oh yeah, we don't believe in hell.
And you're like...
Yeah, and I was like, whoa, wait a second. What do you mean you don't believe in hell? And he was like, oh yeah, like, if you're a Jew, like, and you're bad, like, you know, you get tortured for years, but then you eventually go to heaven. And
I mean, we're going a little bit long, but I'm always interested to hear, because I grew up really not religious, so anything anybody said, I was like, well, that seems weird.
Yeah.
But is it weird to, like, for you to be a religious person and you talk to somebody else who's, like, different religion, they're like, oh, this is true, and you're like, different things from what I believe. What, like, does that make you think that guy is wrong, or am I wrong, or...
You mean, like, now or back then?
Back then.
I just assumed everyone was wrong. When you're told that everyone around you believes bullshit, and that what you believe is the only one truth, and everyone in your family believes that, and you go to a place every Saturday that tells you that, you just kind of assume, like, that you have this, special knowledge that no one else has.
Sure.
And if anything, I felt almost like I kind of understand why so many Christians like to proselytize to people that don't believe.
Because they're the ones who are right.
Because they're like, oh man, all these poor people out there that have no idea they're all going to die and burn forever, and it's like I just got to get the word out. And if anything, I was probably like that. But I was also somehow savvy enough, even as a child, to be like, no one wants to hear this bullshit from me. So I just kind of left well enough alone.
I like that. I like they didn't care.
I was like, I don't want them to burn in hell, but I also don't want to seem tacky. So I'm just gonna not bring it up.
That's how you live your everyday life now.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't want to be tacky.
I just don't want to be gauche.
Okay. Anything else you want to put a cap on?
Oh man.
You want to say hi to Neens?
Hi Neens. I love you, Mom, so much. You know, I will say this. I feel sorry for anyone that was a part of a cult that, you know, horribly abused them, whether physically, mentally, whatever. But in a weird way, I wouldn't trade my upbringing.
Wow.
Wow. The fact that...
Wow. This can't be your cap, because we have to dig into this.
No, well, the fact that I was exposed to such a... Exotic's not the right word, but just strange...
White people.
Strange, realm of religion that is so not of the norm for most people who would consider themselves mainstream Christians or whatever. It definitely has affected the way I think and look at the world, and it has...
You think for the better? I mean, obviously everybody's upbringing has affected the way they look at the world.
I think people that question things are typically... That is probably the best way to look at life, is to always sort of be wondering and questioning.
But I have the benefit of not growing up in school.
True.
I had a doctor my whole life.
But I don't know if I would be as wondering and questioning and searching if I hadn't had that upbringing. At the same time, I don't know if I would also have this, like, hollow, horrible feeling that eats away at me every night in the dark if I hadn't been raised that way. But
he's single, ladies.
But maybe you can't have one without the other, as far as, at least in my experience. I don't know. At the very least, it's giving me just no end of, like, cool icebreakers at parties to, like, just drop the line.
Do people love when they're like...
dude, when I tell someone that I was in a cult, or that I was raised in a cult...
And you're like, you run so fast away from me, I can't even believe it.
They're all just like, oh my god, that is so weird, I love it. Tell me more. And I'm just like, you got it. And I'm wearing just a flowing robe.
I don't believe you, even for the tiniest bit.
I don't know. There is a part of me that is sort of glad I had it.
But I mean, it's impossible to say, oh, I want
how I would have been.
Right.
Maybe I would have been a much better person.
Yeah, but you might have been less funny. Oof.
True. Yeah, maybe the only way you can be as hilarious as I am is to have some kind of weird, fucked up...
That's not true, because I'm much funnier than you are. And I think everybody knows that.
Yeah. I'm making eyes for the people listening. I'm making eyes that are like, yeah, sure.
In case anyone's wondering, Eric is sitting in my kitchen, making weird eyes at me.
Making eyes.
Well, I think that's, do you have anything else you want to add before I do my signature sign off that I'm going to make up right now?
I don't know. I guess thanks for anyone who is listening, and if you have any questions, don't ask me. I don't know shit. But yeah, you know what? I will say this: anyone that's interested in sort of cults, but has never heard of Worldwide Church of God, it's definitely not like your Manson family stabby. We're gonna drink Kool-Aid and all die cult.
You kind of mixed up some cults.
A lot of cult activity going on there,
Yeah.
but it is very interesting. I did not read into it or research it ever once my family left, but when you told me you wanted to talk about it, I actually started like Googling stuff, and it's incredibly fascinating. Just maybe no one died, but
Maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean I don't know, but man, there is just some weird messed up shit going on.
You know what's funny is my husband's company, their headquarters is in Pasadena, and I spent a week there, and I was like, oh, this is a really pretty building, and now I realize that that's...
Was that the college?
I
or
think
the auditorium,
so.
maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
Pasadena, I mean, you know,
It's a
California.
beautiful
Yeah.
area.
Yeah.
I would live there.
They
if
definitely were not poor.
No. Nobody who's poor lives in Pasadena. But anyway, Eric, thank you. Sincerely, thank you. This has been like a year and a half in the making of me like drunkenly being like, Eric, let's talk about your thing. And then he came over here and we had shit going on. But anyway, thank you. Sincerely, thank you for coming here. I know this is like not a thing you do very frequently.
Yeah, no.
You don't do this super frequently.
No one I'm related to listens to podcasts, so I feel like I'm going to be fairly safe as far as anything I said.
But anyway, thank you. And thank you everybody for listening.